Hello there, Parth Sharma this side, bringing you best chess games going all around the world. Well, for the finals, I changed the color of the board as blue, as you can see, and I felt that it should be appropriate. If you want to watch a specific game, then you can find the timestamps in the description box so that you can jump straight to the game that you want to watch. So, without further ado, let's jump on to the game. Carlsen is white in this game, Giri is black. The first game in which Carlsen was black was drawn. So this is the second game of their first set match and of the Chessable finals, Chessable Masters finals. So there we go. Carlsen opens with 1 e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Does Giri play Morphy defense? No, he plays knight to f6, the Berlin defense. Carlsen goes for this conventional d3 move, bishop c5, and giving up bishop for knight. And obviously, if you take, then queen d4 comes with a threat on f2. So you play knight to c3. Sometimes you can castle, and then I can play sometimes knight d7. Queen to e7, h3 to stop bishop to g4, b6, and now we can see pretty much a novel stuff here. b6 is quite an unusual move in this position, sometimes never seen because bishop doesn't want to get developed here because of this pawn, just blocking this bishop's way, and the only way that you can put this bishop moving on b7 is to remove this bishop from here so that this pawn can move forwards to c5. a3, h6, so stopping bishop to g5. a3 was played to initiate b4. Queen to e2 by Magnus, so he's also trying to play something. Bishop to d7, and what is that something? After bishop e3, bishop takes, f takes. Giri wants to castle. Remember, Magnus is white and Giri is black. So if I had mistakenly said Magnus is black here, then pardon me. So Giri castles, queen to f2 by Magnus, knight to e8, queen to g3. Queen to g3 is basically attacking this pawn, but I don't see particularly the best move should have been to play d4. Queen to g3 also creates pressure on this e5 pawn and on this g7, although it's defended by the knight. So f6 is played so that queen also is defending, although it's been defended twice, and the pawn is taking care of its friendly pawn. Knight to h4. So with this f6 move, there is a space created on g6 square which knight wants to take full use of. Rook to g8 so that this doesn't fork. So knight comes to f5, bishop swipes that knight off, e takes, knight d6, and after e4 you can see the pawn formation by Magnus, which means that there is no penetration, no breakthrough for black, especially for this queen which likes to dominate the chessboard when there are a lot of squares available to it, or where there is independence of movement. But however, this queen is somewhat restricted. These pawns also restricting queen's movement to a certain extent. Not easy. So queen f7, he's trying to activate his queen. Queen to f2, g6, f takes, queen takes, and now he's eyeing this g2 pawn. So g4. So far so good, nothing fussy has happened. h5, Magnus Carlsen castles, h takes, queen takes, and now queen takes f6. So basically Carlsen is going for this queen trade by queen g5, check, forcing the trade of queens, and now you can see these files are open, and you will see making me these arrows in the future as well. So now a4, a5 just fixing the a pawn, rook dg1, rook dg8, and now rooks are getting traded off. So we are into this end game. And as you can see, the only thing that is going for white is this weakness on this e5 pawn, and it's not easy to be defending this pawn. So Carlsen tries to play knight b1 in order to play this and this to try to attack this pawn, and also in the meantime to play, let's say, rook h6 or rook here to blockade this king in defending pawn. b5, knight to d2, there we go, rook to g3 to stop knight f3, b3 so that if pawn takes, there we go, and now c5. Now the problem for black here in this position with this pawn trade on a4, beg your pardon, it has created a lot of weaknesses. Look at this, these 3 pawn islands compared to white's only 2 pawn islands, and this is also an isolated pawn. So basically 3 pawn islands with double pawns, and you can say 4 isolated pawns equivalent to 4 weaknesses, and this is something that white can bite on as far as black is concerned in this position. So if you give white an opportunity to bite on these pawns, then things would end very soon. So knight to f1 challenging the rook, rook comes to f3, king to d1, so now activating the king, and little by little Carlsen wants to improve not only his king's position but also position of his other pieces as well apart from pawns. So c4, so he's basically trying to create same thing by this. So if black has 3 pawn islands with 3 isolated pawns, then he wants to create the same for white. c4, but Carlsen is having nothing of it. He plays king to e2, rook comes to f7, knight to d2, now attacking the c4 pawn, rook to g7, so preparing to check like this, king comes to f3 to avoid checks, king to d7, and now rook to h5, pouncing on this h pawn, and if you, let's say, play king to e6, well, you will lose this pawn, and you are in fact losing the pawn anyway. So he plays rook to g1, just trying to activate the rook, possibly to play here or here. Both are good options. And let's say after rook h5, if he tries to, let's say, play rook to e7 defending the pawn, then you just activate your king, and if pawn takes, you're ready to play knight f3 and losing the pawn on e5. So understandably, instead of rook e7, he plays rook to g1, as you can see, but Carlsen swipes off that pawn anyway, rook to c1, knight takes c4, an important move, because this allows black, or I should say white, to go into this endgame with 2 against 1, but both are passed pawns and advanced passed pawns, and whereas this hasn't moved since, so this is a backward passed pawn for black, but this is only very one pawn, I should say. So this is very difficult for black to save. Rook to d5 check by Magnus, king to e6, and now a5, so pushing this pawn in such a way. And now the best move here for Giri should have been to play rook to a4, coming behind the passer, and this could be enough to draw. Rook h5, trying to play rook h6 and a6, however this is restricted by playing c6, because after this check you cannot play a6, you have to come back because c6 has stopped the rook's way to a6. You can try king f4, but then king f6 and the position would fizzle out to a draw, and if you remove these 2 pawns, the position is draw anyway because of the Philidor position. So if after a5, Giri surprisingly plays rook to c1, and he thought that Carlsen would play rook to d2 with the intention of putting the rook behind the pawn, and he would play rook to a1 to stop that idea. But after rook d5 defending the pawn, you again play c6, and once again the same problem appears after rook to h5, rook to f1 check, just a time pass check I would say, rook to a1, rook to h6 check. I'm afraid you cannot play a6 because this c6 pawn has restricted the rook's control of the a6 square, so rook's control is up till here, not till here. So the rook has to return to h5 to defend the pawn, and that's the big issue. There we go. But to Giri's horror, Carlsen plays the exact winning move in this position for white. Rook to d8, and this is the only winning move in this position. And what's the point here? Well, the point is that you want to bring this rook in front of this pawn, and I will show you after some time. Let's say rook to f1, and the best move here should have been to play king to e3. Carlsen played king to e2, still not bad. Well, what's the idea? Well, after king e3, rook to a1, rook to a8, king to e5, looks like black is somewhat restricting white's movement, but then a6 is a shot in the arm. This is very powerful because this pawn itself, if this goes to a7, then rook will come across and check this king, and then white will promote its a pawn. So king e3, well worth considering. Well, I will come into that in more detail. King e2 was played, and after rook e1, rook to a8. This is a peculiar concept because in this position, if this pawn wasn't there, then this would end in a draw for any day. However, with the presence of this pawn, the opponent rook is although behind your passed pawn, and your rook is front of your own pawn. This is actually winning because these pawns are actually creating distractions for this king as to where to go. And this is the situation here. King d6 was played by Anish, and now a6, king c6, and now very important move. If you try to get enthusiastic, or I would say overexcited, by playing a7, I'm afraid king b7 is bad news for you. Why to keep this pawn on a6 is to control this b7 square, this square, so that king doesn't take guard of this square. You force him to use king to b6, and then you will use this pawn, this advanced pawn, and that will be that. So king e3 is played, rook to e1 check. Probably king b6 would have been a better option, try to round up the pawn, but rook e1 check, I'm afraid, wasn't enough because king f4, and suddenly Giri is actually doing what Carlsen wants him to do. King to b6, push your pawn, e5, there we go, and now Giri tries to counterattack with his own pawn, c5. So rook to c8, taking guard of this pawn, and if you take on a6, then rook takes c5 is a pretty easy win because we actually reach Lucena position, not Philidor's position. And as people say, if you blunder at Philidor position, it turns out to be Lucena position because this king is cut from 2 files from this pawn, and this is very important. And in fact, you don't need to build a bridge in this position. You just put your pawn on e7 and try to just bang bang bang, just zigzag with your king, and this rook will eventually run out of checks. So after rook c8, he didn't take the pawn, Giri. He plays rook f1 check and king g5. This is actually making task simpler for Carlsen because king has got to his dream square on e7 where he won't be checked anymore, and with this king cut at least 2 files, all because of this passer on a6. He has to take care of this to stop a7. Rook to c1 coming behind the pawn, and now e6. This is way too much, I think, for Anish, but he's still playing. He's already lost. c4, king d7. Now trying to push the pawn. Rook d1, king e8, and now you will play just e7. Rook c1, e7, there we go. Now he plays c3. King f7, ready for promotion. And if you, let's say, play c2, thinking like, if you promote, then I will check and then I will promote my own pawn. But this rook is also there to capture it. But however, we have an elegant style by playing rook to c6. I love this one, because you know, if king takes, then you promote it with check, and with all those combinations and permutations, you will eventually end up with a fork in which this rook would also drop. And if you play king to a7, well, e8 queen, rook f1 check, and just this king will eventually zigzag. Or if he promotes, then you can just take it with the rook. So after king f7, he doesn't play c2, he plays rook to f1 check, king to g6, but I'm afraid it's all gone, because now king is coming up. If you check, and if you check again, and now this rook will run out of checks, and you are also threatening promotion. So here Giri resigned, and again Magnus Carlsen shows why he is the greatest endgame player in the world. So we come to game 2, and we join the game after move 21 from Anish Giri, where he has captured probably a pawn or knight on d4, and so far so good. Nothing fussy was happening. It was Sicilian defense, and his intention was to play bishop b5 check after e4 c5 knight f3 d6 in order to play this canal attack, which he did in game 10 of his world championship match against Anand, where he only needed a draw to become world champion, which is what he did, and he applied the same move order, or I should say the same technique. In order to win the set 1, he tried to play the same opening which he did against Anand then and against Giri now. He was going very well. As I said, we joined at move 21. So far so good. B takes a5. Now bishop takes f2, check a Zwishen Zug. King to f1. Queen comes to d4. And the best move here should have been to play queen to c3 with the idea of trading the queens. And with this passer, the position would have been level. However, in this position, Carlsen goes queen takes c6, which is a blunder, because after bishop takes, queen takes b2, you are losing this because the rook is also attacking, or if you try to defend this one, then you are losing the rook in the corner. There's no way that you can defend both these pieces with one single move. So here Carlsen resigned, and this was game number 4. And very important game for Giri to win, because with this game he forced a series of 2 blitz games, and in first he was white and he drew as usual. So the second blitz game took place. This was the second blitz game, and Magnus is white here, Giri is black, and he did a very good job, Anish Giri, in forcing blitz, because it was a must-win situation in 4th game, so that he could force this series of blitz games. So anyway, we won't waste too much time. We will just jump straight onto this. Carlsen is white, and we see Nimzo Indian. A3, bishop takes, b takes, c5. This is all very well known stuff. This is not too surprising. Knight to c6, bishop to d3. Both sides are developing. Normally in Nimzo Indian, this bishop somewhat gets stuck, and this is Nimzo Indian. I would say, not a combination, but like a French defense version of d4, because only because of this bishop getting stuck on c8 because of this pawn on e6. And that's the problem. So he plays e5, try to, I would say, simplify into the center, challenging white center. Knight to g3, h5, try to play h4, h3 to create kingside weaknesses. h4 to stop all that, queen to e7, and now d5, closing this center and very strategically closing the center. But what does this do? It makes this bishop little bit weak, and if he tries to play e4 white, then he would have a good command in the center, and he can use, in fact he can use this bishop not as a, I would say, a waste piece or like a useless piece, but rather like a useful defender who can force things when the things would fizzle out, when the tension fizzles out. And the best move here should have been to play e4 to counter challenge. The pawn is challenging the knight, so you can play this and to challenge that. Obviously if knight a5, then queen a4 check actually wins the piece, so don't want that to happen. e4 would have been a better option here, but instead he goes knight to b8. Knight to d8 would also been pretty much considering, but knight to d8 and knight to b8 both were bad, because that actually, I would say, underdevelop your piece. And with these pieces already struggling in the development, or I should say this bishop and this rook already struggling for development, you are underdeveloping one of your pieces only because this move d5. Perhaps by playing e4 you are at least putting a challenge to one of another minor pieces and making room to play knight to e5, but you lost that right as well. Anyway, e4, so stopping that idea. Bishop comes to g4, f3, and now bishop again has to return to c8. If it returns to d7, then you're restricting this knight's development, and this knight won't be serving any good deed on a6 because this square is already taken away. And if you try to play knight a6, knight c7, then after that where will you go? Because then e6 and b5 are also taken away. So very difficult situation for Giri in here. Giri is black, Magnus is white. Let me remind you again. Bishop to g5, queen to c7, bishop takes, g takes, and I think this is already hopeless for Giri because of this rigged pawn structure in the king side with lot of weaknesses. If white castles here, the rook will shooting down on the pawn on f6. Already not good signs for Giri. And there we go, castles, knight to d7, f4, now opening the f file, e takes, and now Carlsen plays knight takes h5. Maybe rook takes f4 was strong, but knight takes h5, in fact creating more targets for white in this position. And here the best move should have been to play queen to a5. So if knight takes, then queen takes on c3, and if rook takes, then again you will take on c3, and the position would, I would say, still okay, but this is the move that white can play in this position, is to defend the pawn on c3, and you are basically saying to white, show me how will you defend these two pawns, and especially f4 pawn for that matter. You're defending f6 right now. You can play even king e7 defending the pawn on f6, but how will you defend this pawn? And once this pawn drops, white can even line up behind the f6 pawn and will eventually round up that pawn. It's not so easy. F pawn is going, and once f4 pawn goes, the f6 will also go. Difficult situation. But after knight takes h5, he plays knight to e5, allowing this pawn on f6 to be captured. King d8, and now rook takes f4. So as you can see, black is 2 pawns down, or I should say white is 2 pawns up in this position. And he has very serious attacking chances because of these underdevelopment of the pieces, which we see very often in Nimzo. That's pretty bad. Knight to g6 attacking the rook, queen to f3, giving up the exchange, although he doesn't take it immediately. Queen to e7, h5, and only now he accepts this exchange. Queen takes f4, but this is very well, I would say, worth it because you have a protected passer also. This rook is begging for development, I would say. Queen to e5, offering trade of queens, which Carlsen gleefully accepts, because after g4, this is also defended, this is also defended, and if you, let's say, play rook g8, well, that is in fact not possible because of knight controlling that. So things looking really ugly. a5, so he's trying to play rook a6 and to in fact get rid of this knight, give back the exchange, which is what he does. g5, rook a6, and now the best move in this position was to play bishop to e2, defending this pawn on h5 after this. But here Carlsen makes a terrible mistake. He plays rook to b1, and after this, getting rid of the pawn on h5. Giri, even running very low on time here, under a minute, finds some breathing space. He thought that after rook b5 he can actually win the pawns, which he actually will. Rook h3 is a very tremendous counter-attacking resource, because after bishop e2, now black is somewhat trying to gobble up all the pawns. Rook e3, double attack, bishop h5, and he commits one mistake. He takes this pawn, whereas as you can see, this bishop is again pleading for mercy. Please develop me, please. And I think Anish Giri hated this bishop throughout this game. I pity on this bishop. What a hopeless piece it turned out to be. After rook takes e4, rook a8, this bishop is unfortunately pinned now, and he plays king c7, and now I would say a decoy, d6. If you take, then you lose this bishop. And I must confess that this bishop will never forgive Anish Giri if he comes to life. So he plays king d7, protecting this bishop. Bishop takes f7, just gobble up that pawn. Rook g4 check. Probably rook f4 to gobble up this pawn would have been a better option. But nevertheless, king h2, rook to f4, king g3, and now rook takes the pawn on f6, which allows bishop f5, threatening bishop g4 check, picking up the piece. Rook to f4. I thought that he has played it to stop bishop g4 check, but in fact Carlsen plays bishop to g4, and to surprise, he takes the pawn on d6, giving up that bishop. Oh my goodness. Rook takes c4. So what Giri is hoping, that after bishop takes b7, he at least would try to push these two pawns, so that he would give up, Carlsen would give up this bishop for these two pawns, or either of these pawns. But the problem is that Carlsen has his own passer on a file, which can run down the board. Not so easy. Rook c3 check, and the best move here was to play king to f2. King to g4 was a blunder in this position, but in fact both parties were running very low on time. I won't blame any of them, and king to g4 was played. This was a blunder. After c4, bishop to e4, black can in fact play king to c5 and king to d4. That's the point. So what happens if after rook to c3, if he plays king to f2, c4, well, now white can play a4, and he has a lot of time because he can fix the pawn here, and with king coming on f2 is actually guarding the advancement of this pawn on e5. That's the very important thing. So after rook c3, king g4, c4, bishop to e4, we stopped it here, and bishop e4 is actually blocking this pawn. Giri makes another mistake. Instead of playing king to c5, which I already mentioned, he plays rook c1. And now rook a5, cutting this king here, so that this king cannot cross the line of the rook. Rook to f1, so Giri does the same, but I'm afraid it's Carlsen who will have the last laugh. King g3, rook f4, bishop to f3, making a wall for the king, although not at the moment because e4 would actually win back the bishop. Rook d4, and here he should have played rook a6 check, but he was running very low on time, so he played king to f2. Rook d3 was played very hastily. c3 would have given some opportunity, but you won't blame them, and the last sort of moves were just mere formality. Once king comes to d2, this rook actually runs out of checks, because after this we will play king to c3 and round up this pawn. So after rook b3 plays king to d2, king to c7, a4, king b6, rook takes e5. If you think rook b4 winning this pawn, but I'm afraid after bishop to c2, Anish Giri resigned the game, and Carlsen wins the set 1 of the finals of the Chessable Masters. So first blood to Magnus, and it will be very difficult for Giri to make a comeback. I hope you liked my video. If you like my work, then you can subscribe to my channel, and if you're already subscribed, then do press the bell icon for future notifications. For any support that you can give to me is through Patreon and PayPal, because your support is my motivation which keeps me going. It's very surprising that I'm giving this message at the end of the video, because I expect that you like my work and you have watched it till the very end. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Cheers. Bye.